It's in every one of us. I'm going to talk to you today about that, your power. But before I do, there was this man who went into a pet shop to buy a parrot. And he didn't know what to look for, so he asked the assistant to please help him. She said, well, I'll take you to the bird section, and you pick out what you want. He says, well, how about that yellow one there? How much is that? She said, $2,000. He said, you're kidding me. What does it do? It types accurately, never has any errors. Wow. How about that green one over there? What does it do? Oh, it's $5,000. Really? Oh, yeah. It types, takes shorthand, answers the telephone, and takes messages. Wow. Okay, then how about the red one? $10,000. What on earth does it do? We don't know, but the other two call it boss. Thank you, boss. We know he does something, a lot of things, and he's good at it. Welcome back. Welcome home. We're glad to have Duke back. So today I want to talk to you about the power of one. The power of one. Now, we know a lot about power. All of you have more power than you give yourselves credit for. In our Bible class, we've been discussing Eric Butterworth's book, Discover the Power Within You, which is the book that inspired Oprah. And she talks about that every now and then. That's how she got interested in unity. You have great power within you. Now, we hear a lot about power. The 12 powers, for example. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote a book called The 12 Powers of Man. And those 12 powers have to do with the powers that are innately in each and every one of us. As Jerome's saying, it's in every one of us to be kind, to be true. It's in every one of us. One of those powers is power. So of the 12 powers, they resemble the 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples or apostles. 12 is a significant number. It's a number of completion. When we complete 12 months, we go into a new year. It's a new start. But without the power of power, none of the other powers would work. There's life, imagination, of course, power, strength, faith, love, order, wisdom, judgment, understanding, and zeal or enthusiasm. Those are the 12 powers that Charles Fillmore identified in his studies of all the world's religious traditions and wisdom teachings. And the power I want to talk about today is the power of power. Now, typically, red is my favorite color, so naturally, even though I'm not huge on sports, I'm a big Chiefs fan just because their color is red. But I chose to wear purple today because each power has a corresponding vibration of color. And the vibration for the power of power is purple. And each power has a disciple associated with it, and the disciple is Philip, lover of horses. And I'm married to Philip. He loves me too, not just horses. I think. Hope he's watching. So each one of those corresponds to a part of the body. Each one of the powers. The power that corresponds to the power of power is the back of the throat, the back of the tongue. And what is the significance of the tongue? Your words. Your words. By your words, you will be justified, and by your words, you will be condemned. And that's what it says in Scripture. The power of your words. And where do your words come from? Your thoughts. Your thoughts. You have the power to change your life and to influence change in the world by changing the way you think. Unity doesn't have dogma or creed, but we're based on 5 principles. The first principle is that God is everywhere and in everything. There is no spot where God is not. The second principle is that because we are made in the image and likeness of God, we are inherently good because God is all good. Now, we don't always act out of our goodness, but we have the potential, the power of goodness within us. The third principle is that we create our reality by the way we think, what we choose to believe, and how we choose to act. That's the power of power. Life and death is in the power of the tongue, Scripture says. And the fourth principle is that we connect with that source, our one source, God that is all good, everywhere, all power, all knowing, through our prayers, our affirmative prayers, and our meditation. And we practice that every Sunday after the lesson. We go into this opportunity to experience our power through the silence. You know the old saying, silence is golden. And Merle Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, was healed after 2 years of silence and going into this meditative state and experiencing the power of all of those powers in her life coming alive. We have the same power. So when I think about power, I think about superpowers. How many of you know about superpowers? You know, like from the comics? You may not know this, but back around 1932, a teenager and his friend created the comic strip Superman. It goes back that far, Superman. And it was said that they were geeks and they were trying to pick up girls, right? But I did some research on the history of Superman and found out that that may not be the story. I love backstories. So the story, according to the UK Telegram that I just read in a 2008 article, is that Superman was created because Jerry Spiegel had lost his father in an armed robbery. Now, his father, Mitchell Spiegel, was a first-generation Jewish immigrant in the United States. They lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And he owned a used clothing store and was held up at gunpoint. And he died. Now, some say that he died of a heart attack. Others have reported that he died from being shot. Isn't it ironic that Jerry Spiegel, in his imagination, created a character that would avenge evil and fight for justice? And one of the first and oldest comic strips that he and his friend came up with that's still around or that has been found, discovered, is of Superman rescuing a man who was being held up at gunpoint, keeping him from being murdered. And wouldn't it be something if this character was created out of Jerry's need to bring truth and justice? So many of us know Superman, and we know something else about Superman, that he was powerful, but there was a weakness. Does anybody remember what the weakness is? Kryptonite, right? This crystalline green substance that came from his planet of Krypton, that whenever he was in the presence of it would weaken his abilities. Now, I just told you, you have 12 superpowers. And the power of power is the dominion over all of these powers. And yet, what is your kryptonite? Negative thoughts, fear, worry, doubts, insecurity, jealousy, envy, blame, resentment. Any of these remind you of any kryptonite you might be encountering? We all have kryptonite. And the only way to avoid the kryptonite, not necessarily avoid it, but to rise above it, is to remember that we're connected with the one source that is all good, all powerful, all knowing, everywhere present. God the good. That is our true source. And the Justice League started and, of course, Wonder Woman, the Justice League started kind of like a battle between them. They were fighting against Superman until they realized, I think it was either Batman or the Green Hornet, revealed to them, hey, we're all on the same side here. Don't we do that? Fight against each other, not realizing we're all on the same side. We may not look alike. We may not live in the same community. We may not be in the same social structure, but we're all on the same side. And when we realize that, we stop fighting. I love what Jimi Hendrix, the late great Jimi Hendrix, said about that. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. There's another superhero whose birth we celebrate this time of the year. And tomorrow, about 10 volunteers from this temple, led by Beverly Crone, over here, and others who have contributed the resources so that we can feed the families of children who are hospitalized at Children's Mercy in their Ronald McDonald House. We're going to have a day on and not a day off. That's the power of love that Dr. King talked about. Dr. King was a superhero in our day. And there have been others. I'm sure you have some superheroes. In fact, I venture to say you are a superhero in someone's life. But Dr. King said, in the end, we will not be concerned about the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Because when you truly love yourself and you love your neighbor as yourself, you will exhibit your power to make a difference, which is Unity's fifth principle. I walk my talk. I live my truth. I make a difference. So tomorrow, I invite you to think of ways that you can make a difference in your family, in your neighborhood, your community, on Facebook, wherever you connect with others. How can you show up in your power to love? Because the two things that the superheroes, the things that these two superheroes have in common is the power to love unconditionally. And our beloved way-shower, elder brother, and teacher, Jesus Christ, demonstrated that power to love. It's written throughout the scriptures, throughout the Gospels, that the 10 Commandments had their place. They still do. But I give you one commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, from the book of John. So I turn your attention to the front of your bulletin. And this statement by Dr. King just really resonates with me. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. All you need is a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. If I could sum up Unity's principles into one word, it would be the word on that window. It's there for a reason. It's there for all of us to see. It's lit up. There's no reason you can't see that. In big letters, 4-letter word. The most powerful 4-letter word in the world is love. And I want to tell you another story about a phenomenon that happened around 1952. It started around 1952. On a Japanese island, on an island off the coast of Japan, some scientists were doing an experiment with some Japanese monkeys. And they found that the monkeys liked sweet potatoes. So they would drop the sweet potatoes from a helicopter into the sand, and the monkeys would eat them. But the dirt and the grit was not very palatable. And then something miraculous happened. A baby monkey, 18 months old, by the name the scientists had given it of Emo, took a sweet potato and washed it in the ocean. You know the expression, monkey see, monkey do? Well, pretty soon, the other babies began to emulate what Emo was teaching them. And the next thing you know, some of the adult monkeys started watching this and doing it too. Now, not all the adults did, because habits are hard to change, aren't they? Even when you change a habit for something good, it's easier, more comfortable to stick with what you've been doing. Is that true? Is that just me? Okay. But eventually, something even more miraculous happened. Between 1952 and 1958, these scientists were observing the behaviors of these certain types of monkeys in Japan. And around the time, now the phenomenon is that, let's say, the 99th monkey on that island of Kashimo started washing the sweet potatoes. Miraculously, on another island with another group of scientists monitoring another colony of monkeys, they all started washing their sweet potatoes. Now, what that says is there's something we call critical mass, or the tipping point. And when we reach a certain level of awareness and more of us are in that consciousness, we change the consciousness of the world. If you don't believe it, think about the civil rights movement and the song we used to sing. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. If in my heart I do believe, we shall overcome someday. There was a tipping point that occurred. And people began to sing the song all over the country, and then all the way overseas. In different languages, the song was sung. When we raise our awareness, we affect the awareness and the consciousness of all of creation to be raised up. It all starts like that one monkey with one, the power of one. If we each exhibit this power of love everywhere we go and in everything we do, we cannot help but to effect change. It's just like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change. And by the way, that monkey story is written by Ken Keyes Jr. It is a book called The 100th Monkey, and it's based on a scientific experiment. The phenomenon, however, the 100th, is a phenomenon to get us thinking about how we can be the love we want to show up in the world, how we can be the truth, how we can live our truth and walk our talk and make a difference wherever we go. The phenomenon is the power of love. And Ken Keyes writes, there is a point at which if only one person tunes into a new awareness, a field is strengthened so that this awareness is picked up by almost everyone. That's what happened with not only Dr. King, but Rosa Parks and others who believed in the power of love to heal, to change the world. Last week, I quoted Edward Everett Hale, who was a New Thought minister, a Methodist minister who kind of got ousted because he was preaching a gospel that people weren't awake to at that time, the gospel of truth. He also is the author of A Man Without a Country, if you haven't read that. But Edward Everett Hale said, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. That's the power that you have. That's the power of one. You may think you're just little old me, just trying to get by, don't want to make any waves, But you have so much power in you that if you just did one thing different to raise your awareness, if not today, do it on your day on tomorrow, in honor of not only Dr. King, but all those who stood up for truth, even risking their lives. This commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. In the book of Matthew, Jesus is said to have said, in the world, you may have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world, and these things I do, you may do also. What he's talking about is you using your power to love. In summary, when we think about Dr. King, among his many quotes that you can find, he had this thing about the strength that it takes to love even some of the most difficult people and some of the most difficult circumstances. And he talked about how important it is for us to set aside our egos, to love unconditionally. He said, darkness cannot drive away darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So before we move into meditation, I want you to demonstrate your superpower. So I'd like for you all to stand. And this is a power you're going to exhibit anytime you meet with some kryptonite. Because you're going to come into contact with kryptonite wherever you go. It'll be negative people, somebody cuts you off in traffic, somebody triggers something in you and you respond in a way you wish you hadn't. So when you are faced with that, I want you to stand with your feet just shoulder length apart. Put your hands on your hips. Raise your chin, stick your cheek out. This is your superpower pose. And so it is. And now we'll move into meditation.